So let's get into layers. So the last video we went over the move and selection tools, and we got a little bit into layers, but now let's go over some of the basic functions of layers and how layers operate. And we'll be building a lot of the course content on going further into layers and examining, the capabilities that can come as we get more familiar with Photoshop. But just to start out, we'll go over some basics on how layers can interact and the properties of layers. So let's start a new document here, and I'll have you go through this with me. So, I must have been messing around here. Let's change this to inches, and we'll do 11 inches, and then 8.5 RGB, 8-bit, good, good, okay. And let's zoom in a little bit. Okay, so let's go ahead and let's go to our rectangle tool, or U, and we're going to just do some basic shapes here, and I'm going to move things around. We're going to group things, and I'll talk about what I'm doing and the properties of each of these layers, and show you how they can interact with each other. So when I clicked on my rectangle tool, we see the top here. We have some information we can play with. We can change around. So fill, that's what color my rectangle is going to be filled in. And stroke, so if we were to click this red line right here, that would mean no stroke, so no outline. And then 10 pixels here, that's how wide our outline would be. And then we can set what type of an outline we want here. So let's do a black outline, and then 10, that's fine right there. And then let's go ahead and let's just start right here and click and drag. And I don't know, that looks okay. So we see it filled in red, and then the outline was black. And we can also see it created a new layer for that shape. And also too, that's important. Make sure right here that this, I believe the default is shape, but sometimes it could be on path or pixels, but make sure that's on shape for right now. And again, we'll go into some of those other things a bit later on. So let's create two more here, and I'll show you some different ways to do that. Well, first we'll just manually just do another one. So I'm still on my rectangle tool, and let's go ahead and just click and drag and create another rectangle. Okay, so notice the presets were still the same, so it filled in exactly the same as a red fill and a black outline, but I can come up here and let's change that to blue. Okay, and then let's click here and let's just do another one just manually here. I'm not doing anything special, so that popped in blue again. But then another way we can change it, you could come down here on the layer and you could just double click on that, and that'll bring up a color picker, and then an eyedropper tool comes up, and here you can have a better fine-tuned adjustment from the presets that come up. So let's make this yellow. So yellow in the top right corner here. We're going to go into color, and I'll explain a lot of this later on. But again, this is just for layer and layers and their basic properties here. Okay, so we have 3 rectangles, squares, and if I hit V, I can move these around. You can see Photoshop has some built-in systems to give us some equal spacing measurements and to keep things consistent here. Actually, let me move this over a little bit. I'll move this over. Okay, good. So now let's go ahead and let's go to our ellipses. We're going to do some squares, circles, and triangles here, but let's go to our ellipse tool, and we can just create an ellipse right here. Okay, notice that popped up on another layer, but the preset was still the same, but I want to change that. Let's go to fill, and then notice, right, the colors that we've been recently using are popping up here. But then also too, I could, if I wanted to, I could hit I for eyedropper, and I could select, let's just say I had a color somewhere else in my composition that I wanted to select. I could select it that way. But let's come back to this tool here, and let's go to fill. Let's do red again. Okay. Now, the way I was doing the squares was not the best way of replicating if I wanted these things to be the same size and whatnot. So what I could do is I could come back down to my move tool, and I could place this wherever I wanted. But then notice when I hold down Option, right? You see I get that double white arrow. Well, now I can just click on this circle and just drag it over, and that's going to duplicate for me. And it'll put on a new layer, and it'll say copy, right? So I just copied that. And then the nice thing is I could double click here, and I could come in and I could pick that color that I wanted. So I'm going to use my eyedropper tool. I'm going to select that blue just so I get it exact. And there we go. And then same thing, I can hold down my Option while I'm on the V, right? I can hold down Option and then just click and drag and get another circle lined up, and then I could change that fill to yellow. Okay? So now let's do some triangles here. So Photoshop has this nice polygon tool, which basically I could set the number of sides as to how many I wanted here. So right now I have it on 3, but I don't know, if I did 5, that would make a polygon, or if I did 8, that would be an octagon. You can play around with that as you like, but let's just do 3. And there we go, make a triangle like so. And then that puts it on a new layer, fills it in as yellow. That's what I had it on last, but let's come up and then I'll pick my eyedropper tool and I'll hit V so I can move this. Okay. Now, another way of copying and moving things around, so recall if I clicked on this blue circle here and I held Option and then I could click and drag, that would replicate that for me. I don't want that. I'm going to delete that. But another way I could do this here is I could click on the layer that I want, and then I could just hit Command C, and that's going to copy it, and then I can hit Command V, and that'll paste it. And that will be on a new layer as well. And then I can move that down, and same thing. I can adjust the properties individually. So the color, I'm going to go back and change that to blue. And then since I'm still on this layer, you can see polygon 1, polygon 2, polygon 1. And then I'm going to Command C and then Command V, and that's going to get that ready for me right there. And I'll double click for my color picker, but I'm gonna pick that yellow so I keep everything nice and consistent. Okay. So we can imagine that as we're working on a document, right, we see all of our, let me shrink this up a little. So we can see as we're working on our document, we can get quite lengthy here with our layers. And you always have the option of naming your layers, which I'd recommend, because as you go through, and right now the shapes are easy because they kind of name themselves: rectangle 1, rectangle 2, rectangle 3. But if you had a document that had 100 layers, and it might be a bit of a mess to try to figure out where particular things are. So one thing I'll suggest that we do as we're working through Photoshop is, so let's say we have these 3 rectangles 1, 2, and 3. Now I can come up and I can still move them individually. And while I'm on the move tool, if I select and drag around all 3 of these, you see that it highlights all 3 in the layers channel there, in the layers column. And once I've selected them, I can move them all together as a group. Right? I can also select them here individually. If I hold down Command, that will select individual layers, Command or Control. And then if I select again, that will deselect them. If I want to select a whole line of layers here, if I'm on rectangle 2, let's say I go to polygon 1, if I hold Shift and then select, that'll select everything in between. If I select again, or click again, sorry, without holding shift, that'll deselect all of them. So if I want the rectangles again, I'm going to click rectangle 3 and then rectangle 1. I'm going to hold shift and then click. That selects them all for me. But one way that I can help keep this organized is now that I have these 3 selected, I could hit Command, Control G, and that'll put them in a group. And then that expands and opens, and I could name this group rectangles. Okay. Same thing with the ellipses. Ellipse 1, one copy, and then copy 2 because I was using the Option key to make those copies. But let's shift select all of those, and then Command G again. That puts them in a group. And let's, let me double click that, and I'll do circles. And then let's do the same for polygons. Shift select those, Command G, and we'll do triangles. Okay. I can still select them individually though. Just because I've put them in a group doesn't mean that when I select one, I'm selecting all. But if I shift select and hit circles, or sorry, get rid of that. If I hit shift select triangles and then come down, okay. Okay. So now they're all in groups, nice and organized. I can still select them individually. If we say I select on the circle there, it'll open up the group and it'll take me to the one that I'm on. I can close that again. And let's see. The order is important here. So I have triangles at the top, circles at the bottom, or circles in the middle, and rectangles on the bottom. So the triangles, if we imagine each of these layers, right, as transparent sheets of glass, and they all work in a top-down fashion. So let me go ahead, and I have my triangles here. I'm going to select these, and I'm just going to move them up. And we can see that because they're on top of the circles, they are going to be in front of those circles, right? They're going to be arranged in front because their order here is on top of the circles. Now, if I select all of this, the circles and the triangles, and let's move this up, we can see because the circles are in front of the rectangles, or I'm sorry, the circles are on top of the rectangles, visually they're going to be on top of them, like so. Okay. And this matters because essentially what is on top, or what is in front, will always be on top in your layers. So let's say now if I want the rectangles to be in front, what I can do is let's open up rectangles, and I'm going to select these all here, right? Okay, so I have all of this selected. If I click and just move this up to where I get that fine blue line above triangles, that moved the rectangles on top. So they're now in front of the circles and the triangles. And then if I want the circles to be on top, again, I can select all of this and click and drag. Click and drag the circles on top, like so. So that's your arrangement here. Now you can also, let's say, pick a particular layer, and if you hit the command open and close bracket, that moves it up or down. So I'm hitting the close bracket here, and I'm moving that circle all the way to the top. If I click on the blue circle and I command close bracket and just keep moving that to the top, we can see I can change the order here. Let's go into that red ellipse, close bracket, move that up to the top. So this is how you would play around with your arrangements. In addition, now if we want to change the size of things, I'm going to show you a little bit of the transformation tool just because that's a really important one that you'll use a lot of. But so let's click on this blue circle here, which I'm already on. So notice I can move it around here, and Command T is the transform tool. Now this is going to be important because we can hold Shift, we can resize, right? I can let go of Shift, and I can basically, this goes back to the original function of that shape tool when I was making it. But for things like, and then for things like the triangle here, if I have this and then Command T, you can also rotate as well. Right? Within the layers as well, so I'm on my polygon here, and we can see, in the whole, let me close some of this to give us a bit more of a, and remember when I was doing the command close bracket and I was moving those to the top, what it was doing, it was actually moving them out of the group that they were in as well too. So just remember that. So I'm going to go ahead and put them back inside their groups just to keep my space a little bit clean here. Okay. So let me get back on this triangle here. So Command T, and let me even that out. Now on the layer, there's a lot of different things that we can do in the layer here. Let me accept that change. So every time you do Command T and you do something, at the top here, before you can do anything else, you either have to confirm with the check or decline with the little strike through there. So we'll just hit the check to accept that. And I just want to go over a couple more things here. I know this video is getting a little long, but we'll go over a lot of this too, but just to get started, so we have things like opacity, where we can change how translucent and opaque that layer is. Whatever is on that layer, it affects the entire layer here. And then fill, well, that's just the inside of that blue. We can see that black outline is staying the same. There's other things that we can do inside here that that are helpful. So if I want to, for example, if I want to lock the layer so nothing can happen to it, you can just hit that lock right there. So any changes, anything that I do, that layer will be unaffected. You could also lock the movement as well too. So then if I select, so the movement is locked, but if I come in and let's say I select everything and then I go to move, notice that that triangle stays still because it was locked. Okay, so just Command Z to undo that. Okay, so let's click back on this polygon here. The blend modes here, we'll get to this again, don't worry too much, but this is basically affecting how the layers are being seen through each other. And we have different things we can do as far as layer masks and adjustments that we can get into, but we'll get into that a little bit later. Okay. Okay. And then here down at the bottom, we know where adjustment layers are. But if anytime we want to add a new layer, it's this little page with the fold on it right here, create a new layer, and that'll create a new layer, and we can continue and put things into those layers as well. Okay, so that's it for some layer and group basics. That should be that'll be enough to get you started, and we can continue with our next weekly exercise where we will be using layers, and I'll introduce some type, and we'll continue with layers.